The Golden Cage. The morning light filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Bennett penthouse overlooking Central Park, and Emma Collins Bennett stood alone in the vast bedroom that felt more like a museum than a home, and she pressed her hand against her still flat stomach, feeling the secret that would change everything. And 3 years of marriage had taught her that Lucas Bennett was a man who built empires, not families, and he measured success in billions, not in moments of tenderness or whispered promises in the dark. Emma walked to her closet filled with designer gowns and diamond jewelry that sparkled like stars but felt heavy as chains, and she remembered the girl she used to be before the glamorous wedding that made headlines, before the lifestyle that everyone envied. And that girl had dreams of her own, a passion for art, and a belief that love could conquer anything, and now she wondered where that girl had gone. Lucas had already left for his office before dawn, as he did every morning, and his side of the bed was cold and untouched, and Emma had stopped expecting good morning kisses or breakfast together years ago, and the penthouse with its marble floors and priceless artwork felt emptier than any place she had ever known, and the silence echoed with all the conversations they never had. She thought about the pregnancy test hidden in her drawer and the 2 pink lines that appeared 3 days ago, and her heart had leaped with hope, thinking maybe this would be the bridge back to the man she married, and maybe a child would soften Lucas and remind him that some things mattered more than stock prices and board meetings and corporate acquisitions that dominated his every waking thought. But then she remembered last night when she had tried to talk to him about their future, and he barely looked up from his laptop, and his words were sharp and dismissive, telling her he had a merger to finalize, and could they discuss whatever she needed another time. And the pain in her chest had been physical and real, and she realized she was drowning in luxury while starving for love. Emma picked up her phone and scrolled through the messages from friends congratulating her on being Mrs. Lucas Bennett, and the social media posts showing their picture-perfect life at galas and charity events and exclusive parties where champagne flowed like water and everyone wanted to be near them, and yet none of those people knew the truth, and none of them saw how Lucas looked through her instead of at her. The charity gala was tonight, and Emma was expected to wear the custom Versace gown that had been delivered yesterday and smile for the cameras, and play the role of the devoted wife, and the thought made her stomach turn, and she walked to the window and looked down at the city below and all those people living their authentic lives, and she wondered when she had become a character in someone else's story. Her phone buzzed, and it was Lucas' assistant confirming the car would pick her up at 7 and reminding her that this gala was important for the Bennett Foundation and she needed to look perfect. And Emma stared at the message, and something inside her shifted and cracked and broke open, and she realized she could not do this anymore. She thought about her baby and the life growing inside her, and she knew she did not want to raise a child in this cold, beautiful prison, and she did not want her son or daughter to grow up thinking that love was transactional and that people were assets to be managed and controlled, and the fierce protective instinct surprised her with its intensity and clarity. Emma made a decision then and there, standing in the morning light with her hand on her stomach and her heart pounding, and tonight at the gala she would stop pretending, and she would stop sacrificing herself for a marriage that existed only in photographs and press releases, and she would walk away even if it meant losing everything, and even if it meant facing the world alone. The breaking point. The grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel glittered like a constellation fallen to earth, and crystal chandeliers cast dancing shadows across 500 guests dressed in couture and diamonds, and Emma stood backstage in her emerald Versace gown that hugged her curves and made her look like royalty, but inside she felt like a warrior preparing for battle, and her hands trembled slightly as she touched her stomach one more time. Lucas was already working the room, and she could see him through the curtain shaking hands with politicians and celebrities and business moguls who all wanted a piece of his attention and his success, and he looked magnificent in his custom Tom Ford tuxedo with his dark hair perfectly styled and his smile practiced and charming, and Emma remembered when that smile used to be real and when it was meant only for her. The event coordinator rushed over and told Emma she was scheduled to speak in 10 minutes and give the welcome address as the hostess of the Bennett Foundation Gala, and Emma nodded and felt her resolve strengthen like steel forging in fire, and she had spent the afternoon writing and rewriting what she would say, and now the words were burned into her memory and her heart. She watched Lucas laugh at something a senator said and place his hand on the older man's shoulder with easy confidence, and he had not called her all day and had not asked how she was feeling and had not even acknowledged that tonight was supposed to be their anniversary celebration combined with the charity event, and the oversight was not accidental but emblematic of everything their marriage had become. Emma thought about the past 3 years and how she had molded herself into the perfect trophy wife and attended etiquette classes and learned which fork to use at state dinners and memorized the names of all his business associates and their wives and children, and she had given up her dream of opening an art gallery and abandoned her friends who were not wealthy enough to fit into Lucas' world. The lights dimmed and the crowd quieted, and the master of ceremonies began introducing the evening and thanking the Bennett family for their extraordinary generosity and philanthropy, and Emma felt her pulse quicken and adrenaline surge through her veins, and this was it, and there would be no going back after tonight. Lucas appeared beside her suddenly, and his cologne was expensive and familiar, and he barely glanced at her before straightening his bow tie and checking his reflection in a nearby mirror, and then he said without warmth that she looked acceptable and to keep her speech brief because the donors wanted to hear from him, not her, and the casual cruelty of his words was the final confirmation she needed. Emma looked at him, really looked at him, and saw a stranger and a man so consumed by ambition and ego that he had forgotten how to be human and how to connect and how to love, and she felt a wave of sadness wash over her, not for herself, but for him and for the life he would never truly live because he was too busy conquering and accumulating. Her name was announced and applause filled the ballroom, and Emma walked onto the stage with her head high and her spine straight, and the spotlight found her, and she was radiant and heartbroken and brave all at once, and the microphone was cool in her hand, and she looked out at the sea of faces and found Lucas standing near the stage with an expression of bored indifference. She began to speak, and her voice was steady and clear, and she thanked everyone for coming and praised the foundation work, and then she paused and the silence stretched and became heavy and electric, and she said she had an announcement to make and something personal to share, and Lucas looked up sharply, sensing something was wrong. Emma told the crowd that she stood before them not just as Mrs. Lucas Bennet, but as a woman who had lost herself, and she spoke about the illusion of perfect marriages and the loneliness of living in a gilded cage, and gasps rippled through the audience and cameras began flashing, and Lucas' face turned dark with fury and disbelief. She revealed that she was pregnant and carrying Lucas' child, but that she could no longer stay in a marriage where she was invisible and unloved, and she said she was leaving and reclaiming her life and choosing herself and her baby over wealth and status, and the words tumbled out with raw honesty that cut through the polished veneer of high society. The ballroom erupted into chaos and whispers and shocked exclamations, and Lucas stormed toward the stage, but Emma was already walking away, and security moved to intercept him, and she did not look back and did not hesitate, and she felt lighter with every step as if she had shed a skin that never fit. Aftermath and awakening. Emma sat in a small coffee shop in Brooklyn 3 days after the gala, and the contrast to her former life could not have been more stark, and the place smelled like fresh bread and espresso, and the walls were covered with local artwork, and she felt more at home here than she ever had in the penthouse, and her phone had been buzzing non-stop with calls from reporters and lawyers and society friends who were suddenly very interested in her story. The video of her announcement had gone viral, and every news outlet was covering the scandal, and the headlines screamed about the billionaire wife who walked away, and the shocking pregnancy revelation, and Lucas Bennet humiliation on stage, and Emma had turned off most notifications, but she could not escape the magnitude of what she had done. She was staying in a modest hotel in the village and had opened a new bank account with money from her own savings before the marriage, and Lucas had frozen their joint accounts within hours of the gala, and his lawyers had already sent threatening letters about the prenuptial agreement and custody arrangements, and Emma had hired her own attorney and was prepared to fight. The coffee shop door opened and a man walked in, and Emma looked up out of habit, and her breath caught because she recognized him immediately, and Ryan Matthews stood there looking exactly as she remembered from college, and his sandy hair was slightly longer, and his blue eyes still held that warmth and kindness that had first drawn her to him a lifetime ago. Ryan spotted her, and his face registered surprise and then concern, and he walked over and asked if he could join her, and Emma nodded, feeling a mix of emotions she could not name, and they had dated for 2 years at Columbia before life pulled them in different directions, and she had often wondered what might have been if she had chosen differently. He sat down and told her he had seen the news and wanted to make sure she was okay, and his voice was gentle without pity, and Emma felt tears prick her eyes because kindness felt so foreign after years of Lucas' cold indifference, and she said she was surviving and taking things one day at a time. Ryan shared that he had started his own sustainable fashion company and it was doing well, and he was still in New York and still believed in creating businesses that made a positive impact, and Emma remembered how they used to talk for hours about changing the world and making art that mattered, and she realized how much she had missed having someone who understood her soul. They talked for 3 hours, and the conversation flowed easily and naturally, and Emma told him about the pregnancy and her fears about being a single mother and her determination to build a new life, and Ryan listened without judgment and shared his own struggles and failures and successes, and there was no performance, no pretense, just two old friends reconnecting. When they finally said goodbye, Ryan asked if he could see her again and maybe take her to dinner, and Emma hesitated because her divorce was not final and her life was in chaos and she was pregnant and vulnerable, but something in his eyes made her say yes, and as she walked back to her hotel she felt something she had not felt in years, and it was hope. The next week Emma found a small apartment in Chelsea and began setting up a life that was truly hers, and she enrolled in an online art history course and started sketching again, and her baby bump was beginning to show, and she would place her hand there and talk to her child about strength and freedom and choosing love over fear. Lucas had tried to contact her through intermediaries, and his mother had called crying and begging Emma to reconsider and think about the family reputation and the scandal, but Emma stood firm, and she knew that returning would be choosing death over life, and she would rather struggle honestly than live comfortably in a lie. Ryan had become a constant presence, and he would bring her tea and walk with her through the city and take her to gallery openings and small music venues, and he never pushed or demanded anything, and he just showed up consistently and authentically, and Emma found herself falling not into infatuation but into a deep respect and genuine connection. One evening, as they sat on a bench in Washington Square Park watching street performers, Ryan took her hand and told her she was the bravest person he knew, and that leaving Lucas took more courage than most people would ever have, and Emma leaned her head on his shoulder and felt the baby kick for the first time, and she knew that whatever came next she would face it not alone but surrounded by real love and real support, and that made all the difference. Shadows and light. The divorce proceedings had become a battlefield, and Lucas was using every weapon in his arsenal to destroy Emma, and his lawyers painted her as a gold digger and an opportunist who had planned the public humiliation, and his private investigators followed her everywhere, documenting her meetings with Ryan and twisting their friendship into something scandalous, and the media was eating it up with headlines that portrayed Emma as both victim and villain, depending on which outlet you read. Emma sat in her attorney office and listened to Sarah Chen, her fierce and brilliant lawyer, explain that Lucas was demanding full custody and claiming Emma was mentally unstable and unfit to be a mother, and the accusations were baseless and cruel, but they still hurt, and Emma felt her protective instincts surge because no one would take her child from her, and she would fight with everything she had. Ryan had been her anchor through all of it, and he would show up at her apartment with food when she forgot to eat and hold her when the stress became overwhelming, and he never asked for anything in return and never pressured her for more than she could give, and Emma realized that this was what real love looked like, and it was patient and kind and selfless in ways that Lucas had never been. One night Emma woke up to find her phone flooded with messages, and her hands shook as she opened them, and someone had leaked private photos from her marriage and text messages between her and Lucas that showed his emotional abuse and his affairs with other women, and the public opinion shifted overnight, and suddenly Emma was seen as the wronged wife, and Lucas' reputation began to crumble under the weight of his own cruelty. Lucas showed up at her apartment building the next morning, and the doorman called Emma to warn her, and she could see him from her window pacing and angry and desperate, and she almost felt sorry for him because he was finally experiencing what it felt like to lose control and to have the world see him as he truly was. Emma went downstairs against her better judgment, and they stood on the sidewalk, and Lucas looked disheveled and exhausted, and he begged her to come back and said he would change and that he needed her, and for a moment Emma saw a glimpse of the man she had married before ambition consumed him, but she knew that people did not change unless they wanted to, and Lucas only wanted to restore his image, not rebuild their marriage. She told him it was over and that she forgave him but could never trust him again, and that their child deserved better than parents who stayed together out of obligation or fear, and Lucas' face hardened, and he said she would regret this and that he would make sure she got nothing, and Emma smiled sadly and said she already had everything that mattered, and she walked away leaving him standing there alone. Ryan was waiting upstairs, and he did not ask what happened, and instead he made her chamomile tea and put on her favorite music, and they sat together in comfortable silence, and Emma realized that this was healing and this was growth, and this was what it meant to be truly seen and valued. The weeks passed, and Emma baby bump grew, and she started preparing the nursery in her small apartment and painting the walls a soft yellow, and Ryan helped her assemble the crib and hang artwork, and he talked to her belly and told the baby stories about adventure and courage, and Emma would watch him and feel her heart expand with possibility. Lucas' lawyers eventually offered a settlement, and Sarah advised Emma to take it, and it was fair and would provide security for her and the child, and Emma signed the papers and felt a chapter close and another one begin, and she was no longer Mrs. Lucas Bennett, and she was simply Emma Collins, and the name felt like coming home. One evening Emma opened her laptop and started a blog about her experience, and she wrote about toxic relationships and finding strength in choosing yourself and the courage it takes to walk away from what looks perfect on the outside, and her words resonated, and women from all over the world reached out sharing their own stories, and Emma realized her pain had purpose and her voice could help others break free from their own golden cages. Ryan took her to a small art gallery in Soho and told her he had a surprise, and when they walked in, Emma saw her paintings hanging on the walls, and Ryan had secretly submitted her work, and the gallery owner loved it and wanted to feature her in an upcoming show, and Emma cried happy tears because her dream was finally coming alive and she was creating again and being herself again. New beginnings. 6 months after the gala, Emma stood in the maternity ward holding her daughter Sophia Grace Collins, and the baby had dark hair and bright eyes and tiny perfect fingers that wrapped around Emma's thumb with surprising strength, and Emma had never felt love like this, and it was overwhelming and pure and made everything she had endured worthwhile. Ryan was there in the delivery room, and he had held Emma's hand through every contraction and every push, and when Sophia was born he cried and told Emma she was incredible, and in that moment Emma knew that family was not about biology or legal documents but about who showed up and who stayed and who loved without conditions. Lucas had sent flowers and a card requesting visitation rights, and Emma was willing to co-parent civilly for Sophia's sake, and she would not deny her daughter a relationship with her father, but she would also not allow Lucas to control or manipulate her anymore, and boundaries were firmly in place. Emma took Sophia home to the Chelsea apartment, and Ryan had decorated it with balloons and welcome home banners, and he had stocked the fridge and organized all the baby supplies, and Emma looked around at her small beautiful life and felt grateful beyond measure. The art show had been a massive success, and Emma had sold 12 paintings and received commissions for more, and critics praised her raw emotional honesty and her ability to capture the complexity of human relationships on canvas, and she was building a career on her own terms and supporting herself and her daughter through her talent and hard work. Ryan and Emma's relationship had deepened slowly and naturally, and there was no rush and no pressure, and they had kissed for the first time on her birthday, and it was tender and sweet and felt like a promise, and Emma knew she was falling in love, but this time it was different, and it was built on friendship and respect and shared values. One evening, as Emma nursed Sophia and Ryan read articles aloud about sustainable fashion trends, he stopped mid-sentence and looked at her with such intensity that Emma's breath caught, and he said he loved her and that he loved Sophia and that he wanted to build a life with them if she would have him, and Emma felt tears stream down her face because this was everything she had ever wanted. She told him she loved him too and that she wanted to take it slow and do it right, and Ryan agreed and said he would wait as long as she needed and that he was not going anywhere, and they sat together in the glow of the lamplight, and Emma realized that true wealth was not measured in bank accounts or square footage but in moments like this where love was real and present and freely given. Lucas eventually settled into a routine of seeing Sophia every other weekend, and he was trying to be a better father, and Emma could see him making an effort, and she hoped that becoming a parent would teach him what she could not, and that Sophia would receive the love and attention that Emma had been denied. Emma's blog had grown into a podcast and then a book deal, and she was writing about her journey and helping other women find their voice and their strength, and the response was overwhelming and positive, and she realized that her story was not just about leaving a bad marriage but about discovering who you are when you strip away all the expectations and pretenses. Ryan proposed on a rainy Tuesday morning with no fanfare or grand gestures, and just the two of them and Sophia in the apartment, and he got down on one knee with a simple vintage ring and asked Emma to marry him when she was ready, and Emma said yes through tears and laughter, and they decided to wait a year and build their foundation and make sure they were doing it for the right reasons. Emma stood on her small balcony overlooking the city and watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, and she held Sophia close and thought about how far she had come and the life she had built from the ashes of her old one, and she was not rich by society standards, but she was wealthy in all the ways that mattered, and she had love and purpose and freedom and authenticity, and as the stars began to appear she whispered to her daughter that true happiness was not something you found in someone else but something you created from within, and that love when it was real was not about possession but about partnership and mutual growth, and that she would always be enough exactly as she was.